Hello everyone, welcome to yet another episode of Polity Quick Revision Series. So in this video, we'll talk about the President and the Governor. Here we'll have a comparative study of both the President and the Governor in terms of their election, their qualifications, the powers and functions that they have, the constitutional positions, and many such things. And finally, we'll also take a look at some interesting questions from this particular topic. So without any further delay, let's get started.
So when you have ordinary bills, the president has a particular role, okay, and the governor has a certain role. Let's take a look at this. So every ordinary bill, after it is passed by both houses of the parliament, okay, now both, so when do you have a joint sitting? When do we have a joint sitting?
During deadlock.
And how do we define a deadlock?
Equal votes for a particular thing.
Equal votes for a particular thing. See, the Lok Sabha, I see. Okay, so you're going with the actual English meaning of the deadlock term. Okay, I see. But you know, right? So Lok Sabha has more members. Rajya Sabha has less number of members. Now, only and this joint setting method is there in your central government and not central legislature and not in your state legislatures. That's point number one. Sometimes there will be a point at which you make you introduce a particular kind of a bill. Okay, now you debate and pass this in this particular house, you send it to the other house is going to reject that. No, this is not a good one. Or if, let's say, Rajya Sabha is going to make some sort of amendments, I'm just saying lot, I'm sort of exaggerating this so that you can understand. I'm making a lot of sort of changes and sending it back to Lok Sabha, and Lok Sabha feels like, hey, we have debated this and we have passed something. What kind of amendments you're mentioning, the merits of it, we've already talked about. This is not what we want. And then, so the Lok Sabha is not okay with the amendments that were introduced in the Rajya Sabha. So now then we can say that, hey, okay, this is a situation of, a deadlock. And for that deadlock, the president can sort of call for a joint sitting in which both the houses will sit, and then the votes are going to be 255 or whatever that number is currently, okay, plus your 543 or exact number of members who are there in the parliament at the moment. Okay, and then it is, because it's an ordinary bill, it's going to be with a simple majority. Who will get their way? Will it be the Lok Sabha getting their way, or will it be the Rajya Sabha getting its way? It will be the Lok Sabha generally, and there is a reason for it. The reason is that Lok Sabha has much larger numbers. So what the Lok Sabha wants, possibly, the chances of them getting that is a little higher. Now let's take a look at this. Okay, so let's take a look. There are three. So every ordinary bill, after it is passed by both the houses of the parliament, either singly or at a joint sitting, is presented to the president for his assent. Now there are three options that the president might have. He may give his assent to the bill. First number thing that we've talked about. Okay, he may withhold his assent, or he may return the bill for the reconsideration. Now, if the bill is passed by the houses without, let's say, without the sort of amendments that, without any sort of changes, and it is given to the president must still give his assent. And that is what we talked about as suspensive veto. What if it was a qualified veto, guys? Had it been a qualified veto, what would have been the situation? After the president rejects it, you have to pass it with a higher majority. But we don't have that. We have suspensive veto, in which, okay, even the next time when they give it, the president must give their assent, and that time, it can be the exact same simple majority. Now, if it is about ordinary bills with regard to the governor, okay, the three steps are the same. Okay, giving assent, okay, withholding, okay, and then finally you're returning the bill for reconsideration. But however, okay, and same suspensive veto, but however, he can also reserve certain bills for the consideration of the president. He can also reserve certain bills for the consideration of the president. Now, there are certain aspects that the state cannot decide by itself, or maybe what the state wants to do, it might be against the some constitutional provisions, or the interstate sort of commerce, interstate sort of movement, or it might even be bothering another close by state, so that could have repercussions that is beyond its borders. And those sort of cases, the bill has to be reserved for the consideration of the president. Has to be reserved for the consideration of the president. Does that sort of make sense? So this is what I mean by, okay, 80% of the answer will be the same. So most of your governor, just like how we have discussed most of your president, if you do your governor chapter, you will realize that there is a very little bit that you have to sort of keep in mind. But if you finish president and then come back after a few days to your governor, by the time you finish the other chapters, you may not remember these finer points. Okay, and you will not remember that only 20% is new. Okay, you will be reading everything, okay, again and again, but if it is now, you will know these already, it will go much sooner. Okay, so when a state bill is reserved by, okay, this particular case we'll take a look at. When the state bill is reserved by the governor for the consideration of the president has again three alternatives. So one thing is, you can give your assent, you can actually withhold your assent, or you can return the bill. Now, let us say the president has returned the bill to the state assembly. The state assembly has decided that, hey, we like the bill the way it is, and they send it back. They send it back to the president in the very same form. What is the role of the president now? Does the president have to give assent to it? Because he had to give assent to it when it was about the parliament passing it again. Suspensive veto. What about in this case? So in this particular case, the president is not bound to give assent to the bill. So I'll repeat this again. If the Lok Sabha, Rajya Sabha pass a bill, okay, and they give it to the president to try to make it as an act, the president in the second attempt has to pass it, has to accept it, has to give assent to the bill. However, if this is from the legislature, state legislature, I beg your pardon, if it is from the state legislature, and the state legislature, say governor, and the governor has actually decided to keep this bill or refer this bill, reserve the bill for the consideration of the president. Reserve is the right word, okay? Reserve the bill for the consideration of the president. The president, if it's the same situation where the president, sort of sends it back to the state legislature, please guys consider it again, reconsider it again, but the state legislature has passed it without any sort of amendments, but this time the president does not have to give the assent. Okay, he is not bound to give assent to the bill. These are the exact words that are mentioned in our constitution. Now, however, because when the governor has reserved the bill, what is his role? The president returns it. Okay, now state legislature is passing it. After this, does it go to the governor or does it go to the president?
It goes to the governor.
Now that makes sense, right? That should be logically the process. The house actually passes it, both the houses pass it, and then it goes to the governor. But an interesting line here is, once the governor has reserved the bill for the consideration of the president, if you guys see the very first line here, what's happening? Why is it not underlining? Consideration of the president, the governor will have no further role. Okay, so the governor is done. So again, so it is going to the president only. Does that make sense? So, this one line is a lot more important. In case you have your book open, can you please highlight this? Iske baad, the president has no further role. Sorry, the governor has no further role. I'm so sorry for the confusion. The governor has no further role once he sort of decides to reserve the bill for the president. Now, from now on, it's the president's responsibility to deal with this particular bill. Is that clear? Now these are for your ordinary bills. Now ordinary bills are something that are like general bills. Now, however, there are certain bills called money bills, right? There are certain bills called money bills. Money bills, there are different types of money bills. Okay, we'll take a look at it when we talk about the chapter in the Parliament chapter. But what are money bills? So money bills are those bills that can only be passed or introduced in the Lok Sabha. It deals with your taxation related activities. It deals with items that are mentioned in Article 110 of the Indian Constitution. Okay, financial matters like your taxation, public expenditure, those sort of elements. That is your money bill. So having mentioned what is a money bill, now let's take a look at what are the roles of the president and the governor when it comes to money bill. Now remember, money bill may generally the president will give his assent. Okay, he may give his assent. Okay, but he can also withhold his assent. Okay, but the president cannot return a money bill. There is no returning of a money bill. If you listen to the opposition speeches, there are some interesting elements that will come out. In fact, one of the sort of criticisms that the current dispensation had was that there are certain items being sent in the guise of a money bill when it does not completely have to be a money bill. Now, the point is, if it is a money bill, there are certain, the Lok Sabha gets its way because it can be only introduced in the Lok Sabha, and there are certain other elements, okay, which sort of reduces the amount of debate you can have, the amount of role that the Rajya Sabha can play, or if you just look at the president's role, he cannot return a money bill unlike an ordinary bill. Now, similarly, okay, I told you, right, 80% is going to be the same. If it is a governor and the state legislature for a money bill, assent, okay, and withholding assent is the same. But however, what is the other 20% that is different? He may reserve the bill for the consideration of the president. Now, thus the governor cannot return a money bill. They do not return a money bill, but however, it could actually go to the president. And if it goes to the president, what is the role of the president? The governor gives his assent to a money bill as generally. So generally, again, in both sides, it is not rejected for a reason, because before introduction, okay, this is the bill that I want to pass, or this is the bill that we are thinking of, dear president, take a look at this. And the president gives his, he sort of introduces the money bill, okay, by giving his permission. Same thing here, it is introduced in the state legislature with his previous permission. So the chances of him having to reject it is like, there's no reason for it. So it generally gets passed. So when a money bill is reserved by the governor, we just talked about it, right? The 20% that is different, the money bill. So just go back here. Okay. So the governor, he can give his assent or he can withhold his assent. Okay. And the option number 3 is reserve the bill for the consideration of the president. And when he does that, what is the role of the president? When the money bill is reserved by the governor for the consideration of the president can give his assent, it can withhold, but again, the president cannot return a money bill, even if it is in the state. Now, if I try to again confuse you once again, what about for an ordinary bill? What were the options for an ordinary bill? In ordinary bill, can the president return?
Yes, so he can.
Okay, wonderful. So he can give assent, he can withhold. Okay, these are polity में थोड़े terms होते हैं. Okay, so assent means what? Accept. Withhold means what? Reject. Okay, and then you can return. But however, here in this case, no return. Okay, and what will be the role of the governor once he has sort of reserved it for the president's, consideration? Again, the same thing. After this, it goes to the president and does not require the assent of the governor. Okay, so these are all these finer points that you will probably know and you'll be very comfortable with. But however, if the options are sort of tweaked in a manner, or it is worded in a funny manner, it could probably put in a seed of doubt in your mind, and that is what we want to sort of avoid, right? Because most people will get, I think, around 10 questions. Most serious aspirants can get at least 10 out of 15, or 15 out of 20, right? But if you get your 13 out of 15, okay, just by, in fact, like, you should know this sentence inside out. If you remember the sentence inside out, you will get that extra 3, right? An extra 3 is 8 marks. Okay, so that's so polity, how well you read, how well you remember, and how often you revise. Especially if you've revised it in the last minute, there is a very good chance that you will not get confused. Okay, what you eliminate, you will not be like, I'm not sure about this, but I think this is wrong. This sort of an attitude will not be there. I actually remember that chapter well, and I do not remember seeing anything like this particular statement. Hence, I'm going to go ahead and eliminate. So you see the two different ways of your mind working. Okay, and that is probably the difference. So it's not much of a difference. It is just more of a how well you remember and have revised this. Generally, one of the advice that I give people is that polity, especially for first, second attempts, right, it is tricky, guys. So give at least 20 to 30 minutes every day. Okay, just flip through those pages. Okay, one day just flip through the page, you'll be in Parliament chapter. Another day, you flip through the page, you'll be in Supreme Court. Even if it is 10 minutes, if you can just go through this, the chances of this book becoming less familiar will be less. If you give it like 3-4 weeks of not looking at your Laxmikanth, trust me, your familiarity that you had sort of developed over a period of time is all going to be gone. Remember this, even if an option is there, it'll use this term, coextensive, meaning his power to make an ordinance, okay, is sort of equal to the power that the House has to make a law. Okay, ordinance is not more powerful in terms of, or it does not have more scope that it can cover, neither does it have less scope than it can cover. So that means that he can issue an ordinance only when only on those subjects on which the Parliament can make laws. Okay, an ordinance issued by him has the same force and effect as an act of Parliament. It is equal, but just that an ordinance cannot be on for very, very, very long. An ordinance issued by him is subject to the same limitations as an act of Parliament. Okay, and this means that an ordinance issued by him will be invalid to the extent that it makes any provision which the Parliament cannot make. So very, very pretty much like coextensive. What is the scope of the legislative power? Exactly that for the ordinance as well. He can withdraw it at any time, and his ordinance making power is not discretionary. This is an important point that you can make a note as well. So he can promulgate an ordinance only on the advice of the COMs. The president, whenever he acts, right, primarily he's going to be acting on the advice of the Council of Ministers, who is headed by the Prime Minister. An ordinance issued by him should be laid before both the houses of the Parliament when it reassembles. Okay, so an ordinance issued by him ceases to operate on the expiry of 6 weeks from the reassembly of the Parliament. So what is the time period? And it may cease to operate even earlier than the 6 weeks if the houses, they decide to pass a resolution sort of disapproving it. But it can last a total of 6 weeks, okay, after or from the reassembly of the Parliament. Does that sort of make sense? Okay, so these are the areas about ordinance that you want to keep in mind. Okay, first thing, let's come back from the beginning. Okay, only when the houses, both the houses are not open, okay, and functioning, right? And it has to be not any time, but it has to be, technically there should be some sort of a necessity for an immediate action, that it cannot wait for the houses to sort of open up, right? And a lot of these points are all about the fact that it is coextensive, and it is not a discretionary power, it is a Council of Ministers based on their advice. And how long will it last? Not forever, 6 weeks from their assembly. Okay, but even before that, you can sort of end it. So is that clear, all of you? Now, okay. So now, the governor's role in making these ordinances is very, very, very similar. The only difference is that whether you have a bicameral sort of a legislature in which you have a lower house and a upper house, right? For instance, Karnataka has lower house and upper house. Similarly, Andhra Pradesh has a lower house and an upper house. In some states, you do not have an upper house, right? The house of elders of the state. So it could be just the one house. That's pretty much it. However, I told you, right? 80% of the next chapter, the governor from president, it will be the same, but there will be some differences. There will be some differences. We'll take a look at the 20% as well. So he can promulgate an ordinance only when the assembly, okay, is not in session. Same thing. Is not in session, okay? And if it's a bicameral legislature, that means, you know, either of the two houses. When either of the two houses is not in session. Because why? Because a bill to enact requires both the houses to approve of it. Exact same. He can promulgate an ordinance only when he satisfies the circumstances make it necessary to take immediate action, and it is coextensive. Immediate action, and there should be certain circumstances for it, okay? And it is coextensive with the power of the state legislature, right? And then he can withdraw it at any time, and it is not a discretionary power, okay? It has to be the Council of Ministers. And then an ordinance, exact same, okay? So 6 weeks. It's about 6 weeks. Now, what is the other 20%? So we've covered the 80%, that is the same, okay? So see, by the time we had to read this, it took us a little longer, but by the time you came to here, your governor's chapter, it seems to be going much sooner, right? Much sooner. So what is the 20%? He cannot make an ordinance without instructions from the president in a few cases. That is when the provisions that they deal with, it would require the sanction of the president for its introduction. So if there are matters that would require, if it is a bill, the introduction of that bill requires the president's permission, okay, or president's sanction. Keep that in mind, okay? Even for your ordinance, it is going to require that. If it would be deemed necessary to reserve a bill containing this, you know, the same sort of provisions for the consideration of the president. Okay, so president consideration. Okay, this is for introduction. Okay, and if it would require something like the president's assent. So there are certain things that require the president, right? The president's sort of approvals. Excuse me. So what does this mean? So this is not a shortcut. It is not a shortcut. You cannot circumvent. You cannot circumvent the role of the president when it comes to certain certain sort of roles that the president has. Okay, so that is clear, right? So 80% of it is this, and this is 20%. Do not get confused. Okay, are they mostly the same? Yes, they are mostly the same. Are there some differences? Yes, there are some differences. And what are the differences regarding? The differences are regarding the role of the president to reserve the bill for the president's sort of consideration, or it could be because certain things would require the president's sanction to introduce it, right? Or it could be the third one, which is it would be invalid without receiving the president's assent. So there is no shortcut. Whatever the law is, okay, whatever the bill would have had to go through, okay, you have to go through the same sort of process. Okay. 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 Now we talked about the pardoning powers. We talked about the pardoning powers. If I have to ask you this really quick, remission, what is the word that comes to you? Who remembers it?
The punishment.
Yeah, can you just repeat that again, Aishwarya?
Reducing the punishment.
Okay. So remission is your reduction. Okay. So possibly it could be 2 years rigorous imprisonment has been reduced to 1 year rigorous imprisonment. Okay. Great, great, great. What about commutation?
Substitution.
Excellent, Sangeeta. Okay. Commutation, substitution. Okay. So can you give me an example? So let's say there is a death sentence. Now that could probably be changed to some sort of a simple imprisonment. Okay. Great. What about pardon? What does pardon mean? Pardon as in polity terms, what does it mean?
Removing all sorts of punishment.
Perfect. Okay, perfect, Sangeeta. So completely absolving the person from all punishments. Okay, what am I missing? What about respite?
Reduction of punishment in case of special condition, like
So,
physical.
got it. Perfect. Okay, and lesser sentence, but special conditions. And what are the special conditions that we talked about yesterday? So we discussed the fact that if the person, if it is due to like a physical disability, like you said, or if it's a pregnancy, something along those lines, right? So respite. And then we have one more, which is your reprieve. If you can just tell me one more, which is reprieve.
Stay for death sentence.
Stay for a temporary period, right? Excellent. Okay, stay for a temporary period. Now you may want to go through these terms again because I've noticed that it is not only difficult for me, it is difficult for every single person. The chances of you getting confused is a little more. So this would be one of those things in that chapter that would probably require extra 2-3 revisions, right? Extra 2-3 revisions. So always be on the lookout for understanding which are the topics that you have to sort of revise a little more. It's fine. Okay, so you're good at it. Now see, let's look at let's compare the pardoning powers of the president and the governor. So generally, this is about central law and this is about your state law. Okay, so the president can do whatever: pardon, reprieve, okay, respite, remit, suspend, or commute, whatever it is, anything that you're going to do, this is against any central law, and the governor does the exact same thing for your state laws. Now, he can pardon a death sentence. Who? The president. Does the governor have the power to do that? No, the governor, he cannot, he or she, probably the book has to change and, be in line with, the 21st century, right? He or she cannot pardon a death sentence. Even if a state law prescribes the death sentence, the power to grant pardon lies with the president and not with the governor. So the governor can suspend, remit, and commute, but not pardon. So just remember, cannot pardon death sentence. Okay, so this is where they'll probably try to trick you. Right? And then the president also deals with the court martial or the military court. But however, the governor does not possess any of those kind of powers. So military court or the court martials. So 80% remains the same. What are the differences? Pardoning of the death sentence is one, and an extra power regarding court martials. That's the 20% that you want to keep in mind. Extra powers for the president, okay, and less for the governor. Is that clear? No questions here?
All right, guys, so that brings us to the close of our video. Thank you for watching, and I hope that you found the video to be useful. If you did, please like, share, and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you in the very next video.